whether it's CRM or ERP, I can promise you 99 times out of 100, it's probably going to cost a little more and it's going to take a little longer. Unless you cook the books, right? If we say it's a 6-month project, $500,000, well, we think it's going to be 18 months, 1.2 million. You can play the pad game, but I like having that real conversation and expectation centered on trust. All right, so true story. Last assignment I was on, we were looking to implement a demand planning solution. Previous method was tribal knowledge and Excel spreadsheets. But when COVID hit, it really did demonstrate that there were some holes to fill. And this has been a multi-year effort to try and get some traction for this project. It went through periods of, this is IT trying to force a solution to the business. So I was overselling sometimes. But as we gained traction with the different folks on the floor, I introduced a BSA to the organization. She would come in and spend nights working the floor, understanding the process, mapping it out, flow charting everything. We got the momentum. It was awesome. Did a pilot project and showed it off to the working cross-functional team. And now it's time to celebrate the success of this pilot. We had everybody in the room. The CEO would periodically join us in the room, but he was just typically updated through email. The executive sponsor was the senior vice president of ops. So now it's pilot success day. We're in the room. CEO's in there and he weighs in. I don't think there's success. Like, this is not what I remember this project being propped up to be. Turns out over the course of the next 7 days, this project ends up getting halted. And we had some change in leadership at the time. We had a retirement, so we had someone new coming in. And it just threw a monkey wrench into the whole thing. Well, then it morphed into, this wasn't a cross-functional team, even though he's in the room with 20 of us around the table. People were high-fiving. But the point of the story is what you come across as being successful doesn't take much to derail it. So when we ask ourselves, what constitutes project failure? What constitutes project success? It's pretty subjective, and perceptions matter.
Tony, though, I think that story illustrates a situation that occurs. I have no statistics, but I'm going to guess daily in companies across North America. And it stems, if you go look at the Project Management Institute, what is our project charter? What did we define success at the beginning? What is our goal? Because otherwise you end up in that subjective space. It's really tough. When emotions get high, and they get high for different people at different times. If you look at how people's brains work, right? When we get really early on, maybe they're skeptics, but you win them over. But now it's getting close to pull the trigger time. And so the skeptics become the people that have to write the checks, because now it's going to be a check and they're scared because the last time they got broke. It's all emotions and perceptions. Whereas in a project charter, if we say clearly, this is what we're doing and here's how we're going to measure just success, it takes that emotion out of the conversation. And when you're 7 months in, you could point right back to that and say, well, here's what we agreed to.
Defining success from multiple stakeholders. I mean, the charter spells out a lot, but a lot of those stakeholders that I've experienced, if the CEO has a viewpoint, if the CFO has a viewpoint, Tony, like in your case, if you have a viewpoint as a CIO, in that scenario, what does success look like for each of you, and are they the same? I've seen that have a lot of misses too. It's like, I know what success looks like. We're going to get whatever demand planning, and it's going to look like this. And the CFO says, I need this, and the CEO says, I need to see this. And that wasn't even in the charter, or maybe it was buried somewhere and they just lost sight of it too. So don't you have to take into consideration multiple approvers' viewpoints when you have some projects like this?
What do you do though when the CFO and the senior VP of ops all agreed that this was a success? I of course agreed it was a success, and you had one naysayer, but that one naysayer is the number one in the company.
So here's the one thing you can't ever manage your way out of: a micromanaging leader, right? If you get a leader who set a team, you say you had 20 people in this group, and who is, for whatever reason, he had a reason. I'm unclear on what that reason was, but a leader in an organization that size that has a senior level group making a investigation, and the group comes in with the recommendation, like, unless they blew the budget for what the actual deliverable project's going to be, look, he's second guessing his team, and you can't really account for that.
Yeah, there was, we were, I'll say 20% under budget at the time. The wild card was when the senior VP of ops, who was the executive sponsor at that point, he had announced his retirement. And so there was someone else coming in behind him. And so that is a bit of a twist, right? But yeah, at the end of the day, it is baffling, but I think it's important to talk through, because this is a day in the life. You said it, Tom, at the beginning, and it's how we manage it and deal with it, right? But but when you're told that you don't have a cross functional team and there's 20 folks around the table, how do you battle that? You can't.
This guy is f***ing stupid.
The number one competitor in almost any IT related aspect. You guys know what it is?
What?
No decision. And you lose to no decision more often than you will lose to any competitor. It's good on you for calling that out as a failure, because when a company invests the time and resources to conduct a pilot that appears to successfully prove the test case that's under budget, and then you don't do the project, you have wasted everybody's time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you spent money there.
Yep.
That's tough stuff, and all of that equals whether it failed to go live or you failed to do the project that was ROI, internal hurdle rate. We called it a winner. If you don't do it, your company fails to get the benefit that you thought you were going to get when you started all this work. And that's the biggest loss.
Well, and I think what we're saying too is, right, this is not a math formula. There's not a prescription to follow that's going to have a guaranteed outcome at the end. If you do steps 1 through 5, you will ensure that you will have achieved your goal. Success is deemed for the audience it is for, but the other is that level of communication. And even if you have a key stakeholder that's signed off on it, that key stakeholder reports to someone, and that someone might report to someone. I think at the highest possible level, we want to be all communicating on the same page, keeping everybody informed. Because when those perceptions and opinions are formed, especially at that level, those are cemented in. That is a tough thing to turn around.
Was that kind of an extreme case for you in that scenario? Because normally when you do a project like that, you're like, who are the decision makers, right? Who's going to say go, no go? Was the CEO on that list, or was that he just dove in, kind of was disruptive in that?
Yeah, the senior VP of ops was the executive sponsor, but the CEO was listed on there as I forget what the term was, but he was always copied on communication, but he was never he was optionally in the room, and but the senior VP of ops and the CFO, right, always in the room, always part of the conversation.
Craig brought it up right away. Every stakeholder has a perception of what success looks like.
Yeah.
And all of that has to be called out, and it can't be buried. And frankly, everybody's got to be grown-ups in the room. If you got senior level communication and you signed off on the success criteria, and then you get flaky down the line, I get you can't. It's really hard. If that's a CEO or some other really senior person that has influence, it's hard to overcome that kind of thing.
That is what it was, right? You had 10 plus people agree to success, and there was refusal to acknowledge that. So to answer Craig's question, yeah, it's just an extreme example. But what I appreciate with that example and what I learned from that example is, I'm hypersensitive how it gets communicated. And if there's a question of, are we over communicating? I would stop and think, is there even such a thing?
In the bigger dev projects that I've experienced, if there was a high trust with the CEO to the sponsor, things usually went well, right? But I'd hone in on that trust factor and how much that CEO and the sponsor were really aligned, and the trust factor is what I used to key in a lot. And we used to, if it wasn't there, we would do 2 week, the old 2 week sprint reviews, and we would give on, where we're at on our on track, off track, but what the outcome is. We'd say that all the time. And if the CEO wasn't there, I'd stop the project because it was going to go off track. We would stop development because certain things, you could spend 2 weeks and a lot of money going in the wrong direction.
But how you memorialize the trust, and I hate to, it seems like we pick a different soapbox for me every session we do. But in this case, I'm really on the project management best practices, right? So after our charter, what happens? It's a communication plan. And so we're going to have a conversation with the CEO. How would you like to be informed about this project? Oh, Craig will let me know. That's really not going to work. This is an important project, and we can give you the Reader's Digest version. What is it you need to know about this project to feel comfortable that it's a success? And you make them tell you. And then that goes in the communication plan. CEO will be informed on the following items on this basis. If there's an issue and it has to be escalated, it will follow this path, right? And so you have a charter that says this is how we win. We have a communication plan that says this is who's going to be informed about what and when. And now we've taken the emotion out of the conversation and we've made them own. People, many companies expect IT to sort of spoon feed them. And then they throw a temper fit or they pout when something isn't the way they dreamed it would be. And we can't go, it's a trap.
We want to be aware of team changes coming. That's another hindsight moment I had. And it's a lesson for all. If a key stakeholder in the project is, that person is going to be exiting. In this case, it was retirement. So that's even more of an anomaly here, right? This is what makes this very odd. And so a new team member is going to come in. Well, that new team member coming in is going to have a different perception or different view and might need, in this case, 10 months of catch up. And so if they come in with a preconceived notion, now I'm going to tie it back to your trust comment, Craig. If IT is the cost center and not the strategic partner,
right,
that's a bad, that's a tough situation that you have in front of you. And now the new person coming in at that level has an opinion on this that can derail it. And that was also, part of the factor. But being aware of of who the members are and any changes that might be coming and trying to get ahead of that.
Yeah, any strong leader like that in changes, they're going to want to try to prove themselves, especially if they're a little insecure. Spending time with them to earn their trust and make sure they have alignment. And they may want to tweak something here or there, but they could derail it just as easy, right? I mean, not whatever. I mean, our intentions could be good, but a lot of leaders are leaders and they want to lead something, so maybe and just take over an existing project that they're not just rubber stamping usually isn't the behavior of somebody coming in.
So when we brief them on the project, we take them through the business case and we say, this is expected to save the company $700,000 a year. Well, I don't want to do it. Okay, well, I'm going to need to inform the team. I'm a little unclear. If we're going to save $700,000 a year, when should we start doing that? And if we've done our homework and we've got a good tangible ROI, then you're gonna have to pick another project that you want to kill, or show us how the projects you're going to prioritize more highly have a bigger ROI.
Making them feel part of it, because any input, they might just say, make a blue button red, so they can have.
I've done my part.
Yeah, so they feel like they help. Because it's you'd hate to think that we have to do that nowadays, but in corporate, when people are sometimes they are as just not in their zone, you just got to get those questions answered and let them have some power and input.
Tom was in the room for part of this project, and maybe we're focused on an anomaly situation, but it's good to be aware of this when you're presenting. And this is more for the partners and the VARs, because when they come in and are doing part of their pitch, the benefits were being presented in the use cases. And it seemed like, now this is a trap. And it seemed no matter what example was used, the pushback was immediate. Well, we're not like this company. It was kind of that, I forget how I coined it, but it's the fallacy that your business is unique in the universe. No one is even close or similar. Therefore, whatever you're presenting to me doesn't amount to shit, because we need something unique because we're unique. At the end of the day, we're producing shit and moving it out the door, right? At a basic level,
Craig,
we're like any other company. Yeah.
Craig, you'll get a kick out of this just to validate Tony's. So we're working through this project. We've defined all the things, and we need to get a few references. Two of the companies. Now, Tony mentioned they're a $400 million company, plastics primarily, right? It's a complicated business, some multi-constraint scheduling, some different aspects that make it unique. So we go find a couple of companies. And, sometimes it's difficult if you haven't heard of a company, but one was Ford. That's with a F, F-O-R-D, Ford. And the other one is easier to spell. It was GE. Okay. Now, this person is saying, oh, but they're not plastics companies. They're every flipping material under the sun companies. Ford and General Electric are using this solution. And this person saying, oh yeah, those are good examples. When you've got resistors, you sometimes just need to understand who you have. And then you got to figure out either how you bring them along, all the things you said, Greg, right? Let's make sure that we're looking at our team map. We understand these folks working genius, how do they operate, and see if we can't meet them and help them come along. Or you got to have strong enough support, around more clear-eyed thinkers.
I know we're talking about just failed projects, but do you do retrospectives on projects? We used to do those all the time, going through,
Yes.
Did you do a retrospective on this one?
After it derailed, we did, right? But Tom's story actually turned into, I will say, a raging success, because this particular individual and the resistance we had, once we introduced the BSA role and embedded that person into the ops side of the business, living the day in the life, gathering support from those underneath that key stakeholder, the momentum started to swell. And that was the exciting part, right? That's change management, and anticipating that and understanding who are your squeaky wheels, and who your resistors are, and making a difference with them and starting to get them to think differently about it. Man, that turned into a success. Now it ended up again ultimately getting derailed because we had the CEO who just, for whatever reason, didn't see what the others in the room did.
In that scenario, could, just thinking out loud, if the retrospective was, what did you learn, at the last thing, what'd you do well, what you need to work on, all that stuff, and you didn't have the CEO vision aligned or buy-in or whatever, and then you took that retrospective, formalized it, and took it to the CEO and say, hey, we figured out where the problem is on this one. How do we not let this happen again with you? Because it was specifically with that CEO, right? So he knows that you're, number one, we're aware of where the issue was. Number two, we're acknowledging he was the stopper or whatever, whether that's sideways or not. But then asking the question of how do we not let this happen again? That might even start bridging the gap for future projects with the CEO, where he could be a blocker on future projects. But that's a proactive approach for future.
For those listeners that tuned in and were thinking about, the train wrecks, project hit the iceberg, failed to go live. Like, we've all had those, right? So talk about those a little bit. I mean, Craig, you've done hundreds of them. So think about, one or two that just the client bought. Everybody thought we had a fit, and for whatever reason, they either failed to go live or they shut it off.
No. Yeah, the biggest one was when we used to not do Agile, we used to do waterfall dev, and, give them the scope, go away for 6 months, come back, and it's totally a train wreck, nothing what they wanted, and they shut it down, right? That's the easier ones instead of that Agile type sprint communications. That caused me to rebuild the whole company around Agile, because you can't go away and, get in a teepee and start coding and not have any kind of input along the way. Those were the biggest failures that we experienced, and not having input and alignment, like almost daily on big ones.
When I think of a traditional waterfall project, I see a beginning and an end. When I hear Agile, I think scope creep. There is no end zone. We have 10 defined sprints, but anybody who's done a project of complexity, 10 sprints turns into 20. A legacy-minded individual, I want to know how much this project's going to cost and when it's going to be done. Another trap for IT projects of complexity, right? ERP, CRM. Agile, to me, is the only method. You learn along the way. Just because it took longer or cost more doesn't mean you're failing. It means, wow, we have learned something, and it was worth that extra investment and that extra time. How would you treat leadership that wants to know, look, this is what it's going to cost and how long it's going to take, and if you don't hit those parameters, you might be failing, I'll say.
What I discovered was that unless the customer either was an Agile advocate and understood what Agile meant, it was a waterfall estimate delivered in an Agile approach that delivered the best result. Because, okay, so they'd say, hey, we want to put in an ERP system. And, my Agile team, I mean, we wrestled around on this. They're like, we're not doing big estimates. I'm like, well, then they're not going to do the project, because the guy wants to understand, is it 500,000 or is it 5 million?
Oh yeah.
And so I needed to get a directionally correct estimate. And we reached a point where we could say to somebody, look, this project looks like 600,000, give or take 200,000. But here's how we find out. So they can understand whether this appears to fit their budget parameters. And then we flip to Agile and say, okay, we're going to do some user stories. It's discovery, however you package that, right? But we're going to create user stories. We're going to define success, and we're going to deliver all of this in 2-week sprints so that we can evaluate progress, define value, and move forward.
Yeah, agile terminology, people can't get their head around a lot, right? So I just flip it to phases. Phase 1, we're getting this. Phase 2, we're getting this. Phase 3, we're getting, because people can relate to phases, right? Even though it was totally agile, right? But it was because when we learned phase 1, we had some scope, but then as we went to phase 2, we said, hey, is there anything that needs to be adjusted? Mr. CEO, Mr. CEO, whatever it is. And nope, all on track.
Well, how about our buddy Joseph at Orca Bay? So you can check out that episode right here. His CEO understands, right? Well, how much is this upgrade going to cost? Well, I have no idea. So let's put $100,000 into it. Let's get started, and then we'll see as we go, right? Bit of an extreme example. So I love your waterfall directional approach, but agile action, Tom.
Tony, 15 years ago, you and I were doing a project. It was a big project. And after the first 3 estimates and the first 3 timelines got blown out of the water, we all agreed we weren't going to do that anymore. We were going to do agile sprints. We were going to deliver it. And when we were ready to go live, we were ready to go live. And, I'd have quarterly executive meetings. And we get to the end, if you look at the original budget, we were about 8 times the original budget.
Edit this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because the CEO gets up. I'm facing a half lynch mob. There's a couple of people that they're
on the offside. Oh, I know.
Yeah. And the CEO stands up and he says, hey, before we start, I just want to share a little bit of my experience and my perspective. He said, did this project take longer than we thought? Yep. Did it cost more than we thought? Yep. Did we ship product in an uninterrupted fashion during go live? Yep. Did we invoice? Yep. Are we getting paid? Yep. He said this project was a success, and I am so proud of this entire team. Right? Let me tell you, there were no complainers after that little talk.
We all raised our glasses, we cheered, we celebrated, and we got back to business a mere 8 hours later.
It's a different perspective, though. This was a CEO that had been through. He was in a major SAP implementation where they shut down the plant. They couldn't ship for 4 days, right? So he's looking at the all-up business impact of what could have happened if we didn't go live successfully.
That just validates what we've been talking about. Us as IT people have to have business minds on now. We have to be thinking business, what's best, not cost center strategy.
Hey, so what about we're 100,000 into this project. It's not going well, but we're 100,000 into this project. So in your mind, it's like, well, if we just put another 100,000, we're going to power through it and win. Or do we cut and start over, essentially pissing away $100,000? Walk through this scenario. How do you address it? And what's we think the right approach for our listeners?
So it's back to what defines success. So let's just assume that we can all agree this thing is not headed to success. In my business school training, one of the things they drilled into our head is the concept of a sunk cost. So we spent $100,000. That's actually not a valid basis for the decision we're going to make today. If this isn't going well, and the clear-eyed math, not the emotions, right? But the clear-eyed math says we need to change directions, then the right decision is to walk away from that money.
We just had a client punt a $1 million SysPro investment because the future cost of ownership over 3 years is going to be crazy, and they could put BC in and get their money back like 2 years, right? And the future cost of ownership is just goes crazy down. So it's hard. Sometimes you just got to, watch that love factor of a project that you're running. When you love it too much, you can get blind spots for sure.
And I think your owner and your CEO would respect you more. Like the recognition that we got to change course. We're not going to throw good money after bad. I mean, that can be a tough call. It can be an easy trap to say, okay, we're just going to power through this. Because what you don't want to do is think that you're going to be deemed a failure for walking away and treating that as a sunk cost. No, I think you're be deemed a leader to know it's time to pivot. Craig, Tom, thanks for great conversation as always. And to summarize, when is a project a failure? There's a lot that goes into it, right? It starts with a very clear understanding of what success, how we define success. Whether it's a pilot, proof of concept, or the actual project itself, have that charter, have that communication plan. We want to make sure that every key stakeholder is represented, and especially at the very top. If there's an owner or a CEO and it might not be designated as part of the project plan, we're going to make sure that person is included. We want to have communication consistent and that we all agree. Change management, it's a consistent theme in this channel. Super important for these types of projects because one person turning skeptical can be a detriment to that project.
My takeaway and thought for everyone is to make sure you're doing those weekly retrospectives on yourself, on any project, and failing forward. We're in technology. We're going to fail. We just don't want to make the same mistakes twice, and you just keep learning.
People are already scared. Any project represents change. Humans don't like change. Ships are safe in the harbor, but ships aren't made for the harbor. Don't be afraid of evaluating how you drive efficiency in your business and what the project looks like to get that efficiency.
And consider phasing in these projects, because if it is something of complexity that goes out beyond that 6-month timeline, 6 months, especially in IT, is an eternity. It's easier to wrap your head around a phased approach. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. So, hey, I got the gray shirt in, and you know what the difference is between tailored fit and regular fit?
What?
Nothing.
Really?
Maybe it's an inch more up here and an inch less there for the V. There's only one V in this room, and it's Craig, right? So a V for me doesn't do shit except parachute me more up top. So I got to get the proper cloth and do the logo conversation, because that's one of my OCDs, and I'm just
start doing 4 sets of 20. 4 sets of 12.
That's right. Yeah. We all have blind spots. Craig, you say it well. We have 30% blind spots, and
Craig told me I had 70% blind spots. Did you get a different answer?
oh, then he was being kind.
30%. 30%. 30%, maybe 27 for you, but we'll round up.
Hey,
notice there's not. I thought the sun rays would be beating in your window there, Tom. It looks.
I turned my machine. If you'd like to see the sun rays, I could bring it back to the
Right. Notice how Tom's background shifts over the course of an episode.
Yep, slowly.
That's right. Those are risks, right? Sometimes it's a gain ROI, and sometimes it's a loss mitigation ROI.
Great comment. Great. It's like security investments, right? Hardening a network. It's like, well, we never been hit by ransomware, and you're asking me to spend another $50,000 a year for something that never happened.
You pay your fire insurance policy.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. I always get pissed off. I'm like, don't you think if I've paid all this money into car insurance and I haven't had an auto accident, that I should get some of that back?
The guy in the Allstate commercial says they'll send you a check.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. $4.87. Thanks. Thank you.
It all adds up.
It does.
So we get to the end. We're going to do a project
This is a true story, Craig.
retrospective.
Yep. The CEO at the time. Go ahead. Yep.
Do you understand that when you say that it implies all my other stories aren't true?
I know when people say, trust,
So-
yeah, really telling you the truth.
But anyway,